It's a Sunday afternoon and I'm making one of my family's favorite suppers, ham loaf and mashed potatoes. Welcome to Homemaking with Joy. I'm Rachel, and I'm so glad you decided to join me as I make supper this evening. The menu is ham loaf, mashed potatoes, and a vegetable. Fun fact, I did not know ham loaf was a thing, that it existed, before the rehearsal dinner of our wedding. My mother-in-law and her mom and other family made the meal, and it included ham balls. I had never heard of such a food, but they were so good. And so now I have learned to make it as well. So this is the recipe that my mother-in-law uses. They come from a Mennonite family, so it's probably from one of the many Mennonite cookbooks that she has. The mashed potatoes will be made in the Instant Pot because that's my favorite way to make them these days. I'll link the recipe that I use down below. And then I think I have some carrots and broccoli that I'll roast alongside it to round out the meal.
One of the things that I really like about this meal plan is how most of it can be made ahead of time. So while the kids are doing their quiet time or taking a nap, I am getting started on the potatoes. You can use any kind of potato that you'd like, but I use russets because they are versatile and inexpensive. The recipe calls for 5 pounds of potatoes per recipe, and that worked out well because I had a 5 pound bag of potatoes ready to be used. The thing that you saw me lay in the bottom of my sink is my netted dishcloth. I use that to wash my dishes, but I also like to lay it in the sink to catch peels or anything that I'm working on that I don't want to go down the drain. From there, I can easily pick it up by its four corners and take it to the trash can or compost bin. I'm not ready to make my mashed potatoes yet, but I also don't want them sitting on the counter or in the fridge until dinner time because they will turn brown. So the best way to mitigate that is to let them soak in cold water. So I'm filling up my Instant Pot, which I will use later, with some cold water and adding some ice because I will leave this on the counter and I want it to stay cold. I'm roughly chopping these potatoes into similar sizes, but don't worry too much about this. Everything will get thoroughly cooked in the Instant Pot when I run the cook setting for the mashed potatoes. I like soaking my potatoes in cold water ahead of time whenever possible because the water does also remove some of the starch from the potato. So, whatever kind of potato I'm making, it always turns out better after I've soaked it in some cold water. Just even for an hour or two, it makes a difference. So, if I'm roasting the potatoes, it helps make the inside fluffy while the outside stays crispy. For mashed potatoes, it helps make a fluffier and smoother mashed potato recipe. Also, I did rinse all of these potatoes between peeling and putting them in this pot. There's a lot of dirt that transfers from the peel to the potato as I'm cutting, so make sure you remember to do that. Here are my potatoes ready to sit on the counter until I'm ready to cook them. We buy most of our meat in bulk, and this pork is no exception. This pig was raised by my friend, a local homesteader. We purchased it from her, had it sent to the butcher, and then got these lovely ham slices back. Ham loaf requires 1 pound of ground ham for the recipe, but I have never been able to find ground ham in any stores near me. So, this is a bit of a labor of love, but it really does tell my family how much I love them, and it is so good that it is worth the effort. I take this ham slice and I cut it into smaller chunks that I will then put in the food processor to quote unquote grind. I don't have a meat grinder, but most people have a food processor, and I found that this process works well enough for us. Some people choose to slightly freeze the chunks of ham that they cut up before they put them in their food processor to help prevent them from getting mushy. I find that that's not necessary if you don't want to, you just can't over process the meat. As I said, the recipe requires 1 pound of ground ham, so I am weighing it on my kitchen scale. And also in this moment, I am hoping it amounts to a pound because I did not thaw another ham slice. Thankfully, it turned out to be just over 1 pound of meat, and that'll work out perfectly for my loaf. It's time to grind the meat. I have my regular food processor attachment in there, and I'm just going to put it all in at once. Sometimes it gets too full if I add everything at once, but with this recipe and this amount of meat, it worked out just fine. Go ahead and give that a couple of pulses to get a feel for how it is grinding, and then I let it run until it looked about the correct consistency. And that is really all it takes to get your own quote unquote ground ham. I really just need the texture to be fine enough that when I mix it with all of the other ingredients, it does hold together. And now it is time to combine all of the ingredients for our ham loaf. I dumped out all the ham and I'm carefully, very carefully, not to cut myself, cleaning all the ham bits off of there. Someone worked very hard to raise this pork, and so I'm not going to let any of it go to waste. The next ingredient that I will grab is some ground pork. Now, I have ground sausage at my house for my friend and our big pork order, but I don't think I have any plain ground pork. So I just bought some from the store because that was easier. And also, I didn't have to thaw it, which I appreciated. The next thing I'll add are 2 eggs. These are the binders, just like regular meatloaf. You need some eggs in there to help hold it together. The original recipe calls for breadcrumbs, but I did not have any at the moment, so I just grabbed some quick oats. And this is about when my camera's about to die, so you won't see me dumping it in the bowl, but obviously I put it in the bowl. The next ingredient is some milk. And the last ingredient will be a little bit of ketchup. I say this recipe is a labor of love because of all of the work that goes into preparing the ham, but the rest of it is very basic. You just put all of the ingredients into a bowl, mash it up, and then you have a meatloaf. Now, prepare yourself. I mix this with my hands. Yes, with my hands. I think they are one of my greatest kitchen tools, and I am not afraid to use them. If you don't want to mix your meatloaf like this, please, by all means, use something else. But I think this is the most efficient way to get it all combined well. So I mix it with my hands, and then I just wash my hands really well after I'm done. I do like to open my hand and kind of squeeze it together to get in between the meat and get things incorporated. I also kind of flip over the meat to make sure I'm getting everything off the bottom. So it's similar to like a kneading action, but obviously I'm not kneading anything. I'm just incorporating all of the ingredients so they are well combined before I put them in my pan. And now I'm ready for the next step, putting it into my pan. Now, most people would put this into a loaf pan, but I really like putting it into my cast iron skillet. If you make this in a loaf pan, I say it makes 2 loaves. Otherwise, it totally cooks out of the loaf pan, and that is just a mess. But I find if I put it in my cast iron skillet, it holds the amount of meat much better, and I don't have any problems with it cooking over the edges. I also like using my cast iron skillet because I think it's easier for serving. I like cutting the slices into triangles and serving them out of this dish instead of trying to cut slices into the loaf style and get them out of a loaf pan. Plus, my cast iron skillet is really easy to clean, so I like that about it too. It's time to make the sauce that goes on top of our ham loaf. Now, regular meatloaf, you have a thicker ketchup based sauce. That is not what we're working with here. We have some pineapple juice, and then some brown sugar. The original recipe calls for a cup of brown sugar, but that seems like a lot, so I'm reducing it to 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and that was good for us. The next couple of ingredients are some yellow mustard and some apple cider vinegar. I think this is like half a teaspoon or something. I'm not getting a measuring spoon out for that. I just dump it in approximately that much, and that always works out just fine. From here, you will just mix all the ingredients to make sure they are well incorporated before you top your ham loaf. Because this sauce is so liquidy, it seeps into all of the little parts of your ham loaf and gets them all sugary and delicious. And the way this caramelizes on top in the oven, just wait until you see it. It's even better in real life. If you do end up making 2 loaves instead of the big cast iron skillet, you can still make the same amount of sauce. There is plenty of topping to go on both loaves. Now into the oven it goes. It actually bakes for 2 hours. So it's nice that I can work ahead, but I also can't dilly-dally because this does have to cook in the oven for 2 whole hours before we intend to eat. We are approaching dinner time, so I'm getting started on the Instant Pot mashed potatoes. I drained the potatoes, put them back in the pot, and then added some water and some salt. I'm going to add my lid and make sure my vent is to sealing, not venting, and set the pressure cook for 10 minutes. Now, I have quite an old model of the Instant Pot, so I don't know if yours will look like this. I've had this for about 7 years at this point, and I've used it multiple times a week for 7 years, and it is still going strong. I'm super impressed. To release the steam, I like to put a towel over top to protect myself, my kids, my cabinets, anything else, and then flick the knob to venting. As you can imagine, the steam is very hot, so please be careful. And when you use this towel trick, it will make the handle hot because it traps all that steam there, so use your towel to open the lid as well. Always open it away from you and let that steam escape, not in your face. There is some water in the bottom of the pot that I'd like to drain out, so I just grab a dinner plate and take it over to the sink and drain it. You're welcome to use a strainer or a colander if that's easier for you, but a simple dinner plate works well for me. The first step is to mash the potatoes and let some of that heat out before we add our other ingredients. One of the things that I really like about this recipe is that it comes together in one pot, and I don't have to use my mixer. I can just use the hand masher. One of my hesitations with mashed potatoes is always how many dishes it makes, but these Instant Pot mashed potatoes really solve that problem for me. If you like a smoother mashed potato, you could grab your immersion blender and put that in the pot, but mine broke and I haven't replaced it yet, so I will just be using a hand masher. Now, as you see me add the other ingredients to these mashed potatoes, I'd like to remind you that I never claimed these were health conscious mashed potatoes. These come from Paula Deen, so you can just imagine what goes in them. And honestly, that's what makes a good mashed potato. You want it smooth, you want it rich, and you don't want it to be dry. So you saw me add 2 sticks of butter and then 1 block of cream cheese. The cream cheese looked a little weird because it was previously frozen, and I thawed it for this recipe, and that's why it was all grainy and such, but it was totally fine and it mixed in well. Then I'm adding a little bit of milk and some salt. I think the original recipe calls for heavy cream. I didn't have that. I just shook our raw milk and then added some of that in there. I will also add some freshly cracked black pepper, and I believe the original recipe calls for seasoned salt, but I don't have any of that, so this is what I'm working with. And now we get to the mashing part. I choose to just use my potato masher to get it as smooth as I can. I don't mind a couple of lumps, but if you wanted to use another tool to get it nice and smooth, you could do that too. This is my final product, and the Instant Pot will keep it warm for me while I get the rest of supper ready. The ham loaf is finished in the oven and is looking so good. Do you see those dark spots on top? That's the caramelized sugar from the baking in the oven, and let me tell you, those are my favorite pieces. But now that the potatoes are done and the ham loaf is done, I'm realizing I really need to hurry up and take care of this veg. So I decided to peel and chop some whole carrots, and I'm putting them in my cast iron skillet with some hot oil to saute them. I don't want them to get soft and mushy. I just want to add a little bit of color and a little bit of flavor. So I'll just add a couple seasonings and let these fry quickly until we are ready to sit down and eat. This is one of those reminders for me that your meal does not have to be complicated to be delicious. You can just throw some carrots in a skillet, and that is a side dish, my friends. This is how they looked after just a couple of minutes in the skillet, and it was just what I needed to finish our meal. Now it's time to plate everything and feed my hungry crew. They've been waiting very patiently for this meal. It's everyone's favorite, and it was enjoyed by everyone. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you in the next one.